Welcome to the Master the NEC podcast, the ultimate destination for anyone passionate about the electrical trade. Whether you're a seasoned electrician, an eager apprentice, or just someone who wants to dive deep into the world of electrical work, you've come to the right place. Join your host, Paul Abernathy, a true authority in the industry with over 38 years of trade experience, as he electrifies your mind with in-depth discussions, expert tips, and valuable insights that will keep you ahead of the curve. Each episode, Paul will illuminate the complexities of the trade, decode the National Electrical Code, and share the latest industry trends, all while empowering you to take your electrical career to the next level. So, gear up, plug in, and get ready to supercharge your knowledge, because with the Master the NEC podcast, the power is in your hands. Now get ready. Here is your host, Paul Abernathy.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Master the NEC podcast. My name is Paul Abernathy, your host, and thanks for joining me, taking time out of your day, whether you're listening over on our mobile app that is free, by the way, that you download from our website. No, you don't get it from the Google store. No, you don't get it from the Apple store. It's on our website. It's free. You just go there, click on the link, or if you're on your desktop, you can go there and scan the QR code with your mobile device and boom, put it right on your phone. You'll get access to blogs. You'll get access to chat. You'll get access to all types of stuff. Quizzes. You can have access to Fast Tracks Tube. You get access to the coffee hour. We just added that feature on there so you can watch our 8 a.m. Monday through Friday episodes of Coffee Hour directly from your phone. Is that cool or what? So we've got all of that available over on our mobile app, and it is web-based, so you don't have to worry about it taking up space in your phone, and it's free. And there's just a ton of calculators in there. So go check that out. Again, over at fasttracksystem.com. Go definitely check it out. Okay, so we want to talk a little bit about in today's episode, we're going to talk a little about MC cable and AC cable, and we're going to be relating to an article that I wrote on the subject over on our website, fasttracksystem.com, over on the blog. So if you check it out, you will see it over in the blogs, and it's the first blog of 2025. Very first one came out on January the 3rd. And we're talking about bundling of multi-conductor cable assemblies, and more specifically, we're going to be talking about MC and AC cable today. But we'll just give you some general information about bundling, what bundling is, what is considered bundling. A term that is not defined in the NEC, but again, you can kind of get there, if you will, by just the language that's in the code itself. So we're going to be talking about all of that today on this episode. But again, I want to remind you folks, if you really want to get into a good course about learning the National Electrical Code, get rid of all the fluff. You just want it to be not full of Paul's opinions. And we've purposely constructed a program that does that, gets rid of my opinions in there. And basically, you read it, you have chevrons, you go to your code book, you read what the code says, and you come back and you see how we paraphrased it. And that together helps you learn the National Electrical Code. And that's what makes our programs so popular. And if you still want a little bit of that video flavor, then obviously you can subscribe to the Fast Tracks Tube, which is our video delivery platform, which is exclusive to us. And that's where we have the majority of our videos. For example, we did a 2-hour webinar just yesterday, and that is available over on Fast Tracks Tube. And it's not free. It's only to subscribers. And in the future, you're going to see less and less on our social media platforms and more of our content over on our own proprietary platform. Why? Because we're in business. Number two, we have made it so affordable that why wouldn't you do it? Share the love. Again, $99 annual. If you use a coupon 50OFF, you get 50% off that for the year. And you get an 8-hour webinar on calculations, all types of stuff you get over there, and it's worth every penny. Okay, so check it out over on fasttrackstube.com. Of course, if you buy our courses and you get the plus or you get the enhanced, then it also includes access to Fast Tracks Tube for 12 months. So keep that in mind. That way you can get a double banger if you want to learn the NEC, but you can also get 12 months of access to Fast Tracks Tube, which you can renew at the end of a year if you love what you see, and we would hope you'd stay with the family. So anyway, that's enough of the sales stuff on today's episode. We're going to get past that. And we're going to talk about bundling. Now, I encourage you to get our app or go to our website just so you can read the blogs. So the blogs are amazing. We spend a lot of time writing these. They're constantly being edited, adding to them. They're kind of perpetual, if you will. It's not like I write a blog and then leave it forever. We're always adding to it, clarifying, making sure that, if we're too redundant in the article, that we clean it up a little bit. So it's always being changed and added. And we love the feedback. If there's something you disagree with, don't be that guy or gal that sits over in the corner. I mean, you can always sign up for an account. It's free. Doesn't cost you anything to sign up, register on our website. And then you go down and you can actually leave a reply or a comment to every blog. So we're very open about that. You can post your comments and thoughts and extra items that maybe you have some insight that we didn't cover in the article. Man, we are here to make sure that we give you the best resource for not only learning the NEC, but also being able to engage with our family, the Fast Tracks family. Those that are registered, whether you purchase a course or not, you're part of the family. So we appreciate that, and we appreciate all you looking at our blogs and things like that. Okay, so today we're going to be talking a little bit about the aspects of bundling and what is bundling, and we're going to show you, talk about the provision of where if you have MC or AC cable, that if you meet certain conditions, then you may be bundling, okay, and we'll talk about that, but you may be bundling your MC cable, which is a multi-conductor cable. You may be bundling it for more than 24 inches without maintaining any spacing, means they're touching continuously for over 24 inches. Then that is basically bundling. And when you do that, you're going to have to do some type of adjustment. An adjustment just means that you're going to take whatever the ampacity is you thought the conductor had, and you're going to reduce it to what it actually can carry due to the condition of use. And that's called adjustments. We also have what's called corrections, which have to do with ambient temperatures, but that's for a totally different episode. And if you really want to get a good deep dive into adjustment and corrections, then I encourage you to go over to Fast Tracks Tube. That is Fast Tracks Tube, FastTraxTube.com, and watch the derating demystified video that we did. That really deep dives into continuous loads, non-continuous loads, conditions of use, the 83% rule when it comes to 310.12. We cover all of that, and that is available over on Fast Tracks Tube. A lot of good content over there, and tons of new stuff's coming. In fact, we even have a new interactive feature now for quizzes. If you haven't checked it out, please do. It's under Video tab over on Fast Tracks Tube, and if you're a subscriber, you'll see that you'll have access to the very first interactive video that we've made. And it is cool, and it's on luminaires and clothes closets. So that was the very first one, and you can go check it out right now over on Fast Tracks Tube. It's underneath the Video tab, and you'll see it says Interactive Videos and Quizzes. All right? And eventually it'll have its own tab at the very top. But right now, that's where you get it because we only have one course there, or one lesson, if you will, there. Okay, so this is a kind of a new thing for us, and we're excited about it because it's going to allow engagement into the videos. All right, so let's talk about this thing, 310.15C1, when we have more than 3 current carrying conductors. So if I have a 12.2, now typically I'm going to have 2 current carrying conductors. If I have a 12.3, I might have 3 current carrying conductors, okay? Depending on whether or not you're dealing with a system that branch circuit is supplying nonlinear loads like fluorescent lighting, then of course that neutral is going to carry current. It's going to be a nonlinear load. We can also find out what neutrals are when they are considered current carrying by just going to 310.15E. And E is titled neutral conductor, and you go through there and you can see that, for example, 3 wires, 2 hots and a neutral in a 4-wire 3-phase Y system, then that neutral is going to carry about the same current as any of the ungrounded conductors or the HOTS. So you definitely will count it as a current carrying. But the one that I just said, fluorescence, for example, you could have a situation where it's a 4-wire, 3-phase Y circuit where the major portion of the load consists of nonlinear loads. Well, if it's a branch circuit for fluorescent lighting, then I can promise you that a major portion of that load on that branch circuit will be nonlinear loads. Okay. So if that's the case, then you're going to have a lot of harmonic currents in there, and that neutral is going to carry current, and you're going to treat it as a current carrying conductor. So that's important for us to understand, because when we start to see these allowances in a second, when we get there at 31015 C1D for MC and AC cable, when it comes to bundling, you're going to see that it can play a dramatic role in whether or not you get to use get to ignore adjustment factors, or you have to say, crap, I have now got a situation where I have more than 3 current carrying conductors in this cable, and so now I'm going to have to adjust the ampacity, and that can make or break your day, depending on if you had a load that you needed a certain conductor for a certain amount of amps, and now you do some kind of adjustment, and now you got a conductor that doesn't have enough capability to handle the load because it is adjusted the ampacity down below what you need, and now you got a problem. Okay, and then you're like, what do I do? Well, shit, if you don't detect it after it's already done, an inspector finds out or somebody looks at it, then you're like, Jesus, who do I back charge for that? Nobody, because you did it. You got to eat it. That's why it's so important to understand the National Electrical Code. Now, there are some key principles that we'll talk about, like, for example, when you're stacking or bundling your MCs and bridle rings, whatever, then you know not to put more than 10 12-2s, for example. And you don't intermix it with 10 gauge MCs or anything like that. And we'll talk about that. But there's just certain things that you learn in the trade, and you have to be aware of that an apprentice or somebody learning early on might not. When you go tell them to run a bunch of MC cable, for example, they might not think about these code rules. And you can't blame anybody but yourself. If you're the master and your apprentice does this, they're under your watch, so we can't kick that bucket to somebody else, right? You're responsible for them. So that's the stuff we're going to talk about in today's episode, okay? Now, before I get too deep into this, I also want to tell you that I have a great blog on this subject, and it's a living document. And so if I feel like I want to add something else to it, we add more to it. Again, we don't one and done these things. That's why it's so important for you to follow our blogs. And we have dozens of blogs that you read them. And I'm a big believer in reading stuff. You know, we do have the video platform. Video is a good supplemental. I get it. But we have so bad attention spans today that how many times have you watched a video and you've watched it and you kind of forgot what the hell was in it? And you're like, shit, I got to go back and watch it again. That's when people always say, hey, Paul, I want a rewind feature so I can go back and forth on a video. It's because videos are great as supplemental, but I never will buy into the fact that they are 100% the best way to learn something technical like the code. I think you have to read it. And I think you read it, and the number one thing that people struggle with is comprehension. You read it and you don't know what you just read, and that's a problem. And so we have to work on that. And that's why what we do in our program is give you the code. Then we give you a chevron to the code section. You go, you stop, you go to the code book, you read the section, then you come back to the course material, and it just makes better sense. And that's a scenario that we started years ago, and other people slowly copy the concept, but that is what we started when we created the Fast Tracks system. It's not about the code. It's not about delivery of the code. It's not about the code content. It's about the system and how we created the system, moving in and out of the code book, illustrations, putting everything together. That's what we have the trademarks on. Okay, it is not one of those things that are code is code. Okay, and obviously we paraphrase the code where we need to, because again, we don't want to copy it verbatim. We like to paraphrase it because it kind of gives it a little bit of flavor rather than just boring content, that type of thing. But it all comes together at the end. So I encourage you to go check out the blog. It's over. You can't miss it. You go to our website, you click blog, and it'll take you right to the blogs. Now, this is January 3rd blog, by the way. So it is, again, the first blog of 2025. So it's kind of special because we took the time to break it out. And again, MC, AC cable. But let's talk multi-conductor cables assemblies in general, okay? We're just sitting here. We have our coffee. We're chatting it out. So non-metallic sheath cable, NM. Okay, many people call it Romex, which is a brand name for a product from Southwire, but it's basically just non-metallic sheath cable that can be bundled. We have rules in 334.80. And again, you hear me throw out these code references. You can always pause this podcast and go read it. I encourage you to be that engaged. Of course, if you're out on the job site and you're listening while you're working, get your work done, make that money. That's how the world goes around. Make that money. But when you get your downtime, go to the code book and read it. Go back and forth. Really get engaged in it because it's going to help solidify it and you learn it. I hear a guy all the time. He's so cool. He's over on TikTok. He's a cool guy. His name, he goes by Philly Queso. He's a cool dude. And he'll tell you right up front. He says he's a doer. He says, I'm a doer, man. He does it. Okay. You know, a kid, he does the work, but he doesn't know all of the code and he doesn't have to. Because he knows to stop and go read the code when he needs it. Other than that, he's just a product of doing it. He's got his hands dirty. He's got the cuts on his hands to prove it. So when we do things in the code, when we do things, we're doing it per code. We probably have looked before, and we're just doing it because we've done repetition over and over and over again. But he's pretty cool because when he doesn't know something about code, he's very honest about it. And he says, I don't know what the code says on this. He'll go read it and interpret it, but he doesn't carry the code book in his pocket, and he doesn't have to, and you don't have to either. But it's healthy for you to understand the code because I think in a recent episode, he was doing something and he thought that, for example, I think it was the AFCIs when you're moving a panel, and if you move it not more than 6 feet, then you don't have to, even on a service change, you don't have to change and put AFCIs in. Now, we can get into the semantics of whether or not you do an upgrade. And if you did an upgrade, then the jurisdiction could consider that new. Then they may invoke something. But if it's a like for like, for example, just taking a 100 amp fuse and turning into a 100 amp circuit breaker, then if we can get into the semantics. But the point was, he thought the 6 foot measurement was from lug to lug. And it's really not. It's from enclosure to enclosure. Okay, so it's the wire between, or the cable between the two enclosures. It doesn't include the portion that goes into the lugs. And it can make a huge difference, right? It makes a difference because it means that you could only go probably physically 3 feet because you're going to have at least 1.5 feet in each one of the enclosures to terminate. And so that's why it's so important to read the code. And that's when he realized he did read it. And he says, oh, wow, I was wrong. It's 6 feet from enclosure to enclosure. And so, yeah, that's a significant difference. And that's because he stopped and went and read the code. Okay, that's the importance of it. And that's what you got to do as a trade person. You have to be engaged in the code, whether you want to hate the code, it doesn't matter. What you do is all founded in code anyway. Okay. All right. So anyway, we're going to talk today about bundling. And we're going to be looking at 310.15c1, but we're going to be keying the focus in on the MC cable as it relates to the article that we wrote on our website. Okay. Now, bundling. If you go to the NEC and you look at 310.15c1, and you look at it, and it says more than 3 current conductors. Now, the first thing that people struggle with this is the way this is one big run-on paragraph, the way that it runs. Okay, multiple sentences grouped together. And one of our goals for the code panels was to try to break things out. But obviously some things get missed, or maybe they felt that this was pretty self-explanatory. They didn't need to break it out. Again, code panel 6 is probably the one that was working on this. And it's not like they didn't have their hands full with some other issues going on. And you might say, what are you talking about, Paul? And I'll just say, if you know, you know. If you don't know, it's best you don't get involved in it because it could end you. You could end up being deposed or something. So just ignore it. But they had a lot of work on their plate, so they probably didn't look, and nobody probably submitted any public input in order to break this out anyway. So let's look at it. I'm going to read it to you, and I'll break it out for you so it's easier to understand, and then we'll tie it into our MC and AC application. So 310.15c1 says more than 3 current carrying conductors. So when we have more than 3 current carrying conductors, we are going to have to do what's called an adjustment. And all we're doing is adjusting the ampacity of the conductor, because when it comes to more than 3 current carrying conductors, you have what's called mutual heating. And the heating is going to cause the temperature of that conductor to rise quicker to the thermal limit of the insulation. So what do? We drop the amount of current you can put on a conductor so that it gives a bit more of a headroom between the temperature that's generated from the conductor and the ambient temperature before it gets to a value that can compromise the rating of the conductor's insulation. And once you compromise the conductor's insulation, now it starts breaking down, and you're going to get bolted faults, ground faults, all types of things you do not want. Okay? So we're trying to protect against that. All right? So it reads as it says, the ampacity of each conductor shall be reduced. So that's the goal here. The concept is if you have more than 3 current conductors, we're going to have to drop that ampacity as shown in table 310.15c1. Okay, so that's a little table that you'll have. And that's the one that says, well, if you have 4 to 6 current conductors, then you're going to be using an 80% multiplier. If you have 7 to 9, you're going to be using a 70%. If you have 10 to 20, you're going to be using a 50%. If you have over 21, for example, 21 to 30, it's going to be 45, and then 31 to 40, it's 40, and then 41 and above, it's 35. Virtually, you're creating a conductor that will have 0 current carrying ability eventually, or you're working your way towards that. At least it won't have enough current carrying ability to handle whatever your intended load is that you installed the branch circuit there in the first place for. That becomes a problem. So let's read it, and I'll explain each piece separate before we jump down to dealing with MC and AC allowances or provisions that you can use. Okay, so here it is again. It says the ampacity of each conductor shall be reduced as shown in table 310.15c1, where the number of current carrying conductors in a raceway or a cable exceeds 3. So that's the first part. If you were to bullet point those out, that's what you would do. If you're a highlighter of your code book and you're not preparing for an exam, even if you are preparing for an exam, if they let you highlight, this is where it helps to have multiple color highlights. This first part here, you could do in pink or yellow or whatever you want to use, because that's the first rule. So that is raceways or cables where I have more than 3 current conductors, then I'm going to reduce the ampacity. Okay. Next, it says, or where single conductors or, and this is where we kick in, multiconductor cables not installed in raceways are installed without maintaining spacing for a continuous length longer than 24 inches. Okay, so we get into a lot of debates with people say, well, what the hell does without maintaining spacing mean? And it means exactly what it says. If you're running a bunch of multiconductor cables, they're not installed in a raceway, although, by the way, you can put multiconductor cables in a raceway. It's a myth that people say you can't. Obviously, you can. So if I'm installing them without maintaining spacing, now the caveat here, it says maintaining spacing for a continuous length longer than 24 inches. Okay, so if it's under 24 inches, not a problem. So that's why when you're running MC cables, for example, I'm just using MC because that's the topic of the day. If you're running them through bored holes, for example, and they're close, they're all touching as they go through the bore hole, that's fine. That's obviously not continuous longer than 24 inches, right? Well, they might even run through a set of ganged studs, and it might be 12 inches where all of them run through that. I'm just throwing things out there. That'd be okay because that is not continuously longer than 24 inches, okay? So the moral of the story here is if you're going to run MC cables, and we're going to talk about MCs, but if you're going to run MC cables, and this applies to any multi-conductor cable, even though NM cable has its own rules about being in contact with thermal insulation. So does MC cable under 334.80 for NM for non-metallic and 330.80 for MC. Even though they got their own rules for being in contact with thermal insulation, okay, that will send you back here and you have to go to the table. So it sends you directly to the table so you don't get to use the allowances that we're going to talk about in a minute for the thermal insulation contact. Here is different because this is just saying multi-conductor cables in general. So it could be tray cable, it could be NM cable, it could be MC cable, it could be AC cable, it could be SE cable. Those are all multi-conductor cables, okay? Multi-conductor being 2 or more, okay? And they're not installed in a raceway, okay? So they're following their uses permitted rules, .10 of their specific wiring method. They're being installed, but they're being installed in a way that they're touching continuously for over 24 inches. Now, I can tell you where I've seen this take place that had devastating effects, and this was in a grow house that was a regular dwelling, and I can't remember, I think it was in Colorado when they changed over, and you had a house that was a regular dwelling that was gutted pretty much, but it was used as a grow house, and they did an installation practice where they brought all of their NM cables together like a trunk line, and then they tie wrapped them together. Could do the same thing for MC, whatever. They thought that looked better because it was neater. They're all running down the same way and everything looked uniform. They looked neat. But the problem was now that they changed the loading conditions, the type of loading, it wasn't as diverse as it was with a dwelling. Now those conductors are carrying much more current. And in this scenario, because they were bundled and they were installed where they were not maintaining spacing, and so in that point, they were bundled for length longer than 24 inches, the heat couldn't dissipate out of it. Even if it wasn't loading them to their full extent, the cables that were inside of the bundle couldn't dissipate the heat adequate, and it caused the breakdown and it caused fires. And not to mention, they also threw these in thermal insulation because that affects it as well. But at the end of the day, bundling was in effect because they were not maintaining the spacing. And of course, probably never caused an issue because of diversity in the dwelling, even though the code is what it is. But it's the moment that they changed the condition of use, the loading, what was going on in that building, and without changing the wiring, created a problem and it caused a fire. Okay? So the rules are here for a reason. Now, it also goes on to say that we can, so it actually says each current carrying conductor in a parallel set of conductors shall be counted as current carrying conductor. Okay. So if I have multiple sets, for example, ABC, 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 then again, each current carrying conductor in the sets, the A's, the B, the C's, they're all considered current carrying conductors. Now, if you go down and you look at the allowances under C1, you'll have an A, a B, a C, and a D. We're going to be focusing on D. Okay, because you do have some allowances. For example, when you're running underground conductors, you have some allowances when you're talking about a raceway that is not exceeding 24 inches, which people want to call a nipple. Chapter 9, Table 1 refers to things like nipples, but again, I don't like that terminology. It's still just a raceway. Okay, whether it's 24 inches or not, it's still a raceway. So I don't know. I like the term nipple, but it doesn't use nipple here, so that's good. All right. And then, of course, any conductors that are installed in cable trays, you're going to follow the rules in 692.80 for cable tray applications. And you've got stacking and spacing and all these other rules that you have to follow for cable trays if you're going to install single insulated conductors in cable trays. But we're focusing on the allowance for MC or AC cable, because it probably is the most predominant application of MC cable in commercial buildings. I can tell you as Encore Wire, we produce a lot of 12-2 MC cable. I mean, a lot. I mean, over 100 machines that run 24/7 year-round, probably break for Christmas and New Year's. But other than that, it runs all the time. And it's because you have the lighting loads in commercial, receptacle loads in commercial, and majority of all that is 12-gauge. And the vast majority of this is a simple 12-2. okay, which does not have more than 3 current carrying conductors. There's 2 current carrying conductors in there. So one of the things that I also, again, to not be redundant, is I remind people, when is a neutral considered current carrying? You should take some time and go to 31015 and then go all the way down and look at E. And I'm in the 2023 edition of the NEC, by the way. So in case anything reference I make to you in code, you're like, oh, that's not in my code book. Well, it's going to be somewhere around there, okay? Depending on what cycle you're in. But I'm working in the 2023 edition, and I'm always going to be in the latest published edition, regardless of where you are in the country. I'm always going to be teaching out of the 2023. I can't go backwards. I have to keep moving forwards, okay? Now, if you look at what's considered a neutral conductor and what would not be considered current carrying, then you have conditions here. For example, the neutral conductor of a 3-wire, two-phase conductors in a neutral that are derived from a 4-wire 3-phase Y. Well, if that's what you're doing, so you're taking a 4-wire 3-phase system and you're breaking off of that to create a 3-wire where you have 2-phase or 2 ungrounded hot conductors and a neutral. If that's the case, then that neutral is current carrying because it's going to carry approximately the same amount of current as the line to neutral load currents of the other conductors that are there. Okay, so when that takes place, then you have to apply 31015C1. So it's considered a current carrying conductor. The other condition would be if you have a 4-wire 3-phase Y system and the majority of, or the major portion of the loads consist of nonlinear loads. Right? If that's the case, then you got what's called harmonic currents, and the worst affected be triplet harmonics. Those are going to be presented onto the neutral, and therefore that neutral conductor is going to be considered a current carrying conductor. So you have to know what your system is. And a simple 2-wire cable, 12-2, then the neutral and the hot are both considered current carrying conductors. Okay, now, if I have 2 conductors that are sharing a neutral, it's basically I've got a multi-wire branch circuit and I've got 2 120-volt circuits that are sharing a neutral. Well, then that neutral is only carrying the unbalanced current from the other conductors, and it's not to be counted when you're applying 310.15C1. So that's why you see if I have a red and a black and it's doing a multi-wire branch circuit, you follow all the requirements to do that in identified handle tie or on a 2-pole breaker so that you ensure that each one of the legs are on a separate leg coming into the panel. Then what you're going to have is a cancellation effect take place. And then, of course, then we do not have to count that neutral as a current carrying conductor when it comes to following these rules of 310.15. However, if I have a 3-phase system and it's a multi-wire branch circuit and I have a neutral, but that neutral is basically dealing in a situation where it's supplying loads that are nonlinear loads like fluorescent lighting, then I have to be careful because then you've got what? Nonlinear loads. Fluorescent would be like that. It's carrying nonlinear loads. Then what happens? Well, then you've got current that is traveling on the neutral, probably equal to any of the other ungrounded conductors to the neutral. So what happens is you have to treat it as a current carrying conductor. So these are things that you have to think about. When do I count that neutral? And if you do count it, it can play a major role in whether or not you can apply 310.15C1D. And so that's what we're going to talk about. So we're looking at 310.15C1D, and this is based also on the article that I wrote over on our website. So make sure you check out that article if any of this becomes confusing. Take some time, go check it out. It doesn't cost you anything, it's free. All right, so what are we talking about here? So is there a condition where I'm running MC cable or I'm running AC cable, and let's say I am bundling it for more than 24 inches. I'm not maintaining spacing continuously. Okay, so all right, is there a condition when I can apply this allowance where I can look at this adjustment factor and say, you know what, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to have to apply the adjustment factor. Well, there is, but you have to meet specific conditions. There are 4 conditions to meet, and there is an exception to one of the conditions, but you have to meet them all. Okay, so let's look at it. So if you have your National Electrical Code, we're going to go, again, 31015C1D, and I'm going to read it. It says, adjustment factors shall not apply to type AC cable or to type MC cable under the following conditions. So what that means is you have to meet all of these conditions. Now, we will give you an exception to one condition, but you still have to meet generally all of the conditions that are in the scope of D, okay? So what's the first thing that says, okay, so let's assume in our mind that we've got a situation where we have the 12 MC cables, and each one of those MC cables contain 2 current carrying conductors, black and white, okay? And so we have got 12 of them, and you don't blame the apprentice. You did it. You loaded it up. So let's see if we can use this allowance here, which is not an exception. A lot of people call it an exception. It's a provision because it doesn't say that this is an exception. It's a provision that you can utilize in here. So it says, first thing it goes, okay, each cable do not have an overall outer covering. Okay, so this is 31015C1D1. And okay, so it's MC cable. It's not PVC jacketed MC. It's just MC cable. Okay. We have no jacket. Good there. We're good. The next caveat is that each cable shall have not more than 3 current carrying conductors. Well, if it did have more than 3, then I couldn't use D, and I just have to apply the adjustment factors like I would anything else. So we're trying to see if we can ignore the adjustment factors. Well, our cables, for example, which are 12-2, which have 2 current carrying conductors, we're okay. We meet that item, so we meet D2, not a problem. Number 3 says conductors are 12 copper. Okay, so this is very important to understand. There are people out there that say, you know what if I have cables and I'm bundling them, but in that bundle of these 12s, MCs, I also have some 10 MC, maybe even some 6 MC that are in the same bundle. Can I isolate the 12s out? And if I don't have more, then, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Can I treat each one of the bundles separate? No. If they're all bundled together, they're all putting off mutual heating, and they're all going to affect the ampacity of their conductors in different ways. For you to be able to use this to ignore the adjustment factors here, the rule is it has to be all 12, okay, in order to do that. Because even the 10s or even the 8s are going to add mutual heating over to these conductors. So the whole point here is that they're size 12, okay, 12 gauge. The next one says, okay, so I have not more than, if you have not more, so in our case, we do have 12 gauge, so we're good. The next says, not more than 20 current carrying conductors are installed without maintaining spacing. That means, be honest with you, if they're touching at any point. So once we get to this allowance, this provision in D, it's irrelevant the fact that we have the continuous without maintaining spacing for continuously for over 24 inches. The assumption is we're down here because we have that issue. That's why we're down here, okay? So in this scenario right here, it says, well, if you don't have more than 20 current carrying conductors installed without maintaining spacing, are stacked, or are supported on bridle rings, then you can say, okay, if I meet all of these, so I don't have the jacket, I don't have more than 3 current carrying conductors, I am using 12 gauge, and I don't have more than 20 current carrying conductors. Guess what? I get to ignore any of the adjustment factors, even if I'm bundling that cable. Hell, I could bundle it for 50 feet, MC cables, as long as I have what? No jacket, not more than 3 current carrying conductors. It's 12 gauge, and I don't have more, the accumulation of conductors in this bundle. If I don't have more than 20 current carrying conductors in summation, then I can just say, forget about it and not worry about the adjustment factors. It's a beautiful thing, guys. Think about how you're doing this, okay? And because it gives you the ability, because a lot of times what you'll be doing is these 12s MCs are probably going to be do lighting in commercial buildings, probably going to do lighting. This lighting is going to be continuous loads, right? So when you're sizing the brand circuit, 210.19, you're sizing everything if it's a continuous load at 125%. So you've got to take all that in consideration. And lighting is continuously for 3 hours or more at maximum output, whatever it's lamped at. So it can make a major impact on sizing conductors and which loads you can have on something. So if you had to adjust it and start lowering that ampacity, then you could end up with a conductor that after the end of the day, after all that work, does not have the ampacity capable of handling whatever load you need it to handle. And that becomes a big headache, especially if it's not detected until the end of the job. And you're going, well, why didn't the inspector find that out? Well, that's your responsibility, not the inspectors. They may miss it. They may not account it. They trusted you. They're not going to sit there and go through every single thing and count. I mean, they don't have the time for that. It's always going to be your responsibility. Always your responsibility to make sure it's done right. Okay, now, if I'm in this situation here and I've got, let's say, let me give you one scenario that we give this scenario in our what's called practical application. What happens if, again, I have cables that are 12s and 10s all together in the bundle? Okay, well, if that's the case, then you cannot use this allowance. Okay, and you cannot use the exception. Why? Because the exception is very clear on what you have to meet. You have to still meet 1, 2, and 3 in order to be able to even use the exception. So what is the exception? Okay, I just gave you an example. I was going to talk about 10 and 12s, but I'll use this while I'm looking at the exception, so I'll make it easy. Let's look at the exception. So what if I happen to have more than 20 current conductors? The apprentice will blame the apprentice. It's always on you because you're the master or the journeyman that oversees it, but we'll blame the apprentice because that's just the easy thing to do, right? So they happen to throw 11 or even 12 MCs in the bridle rings or in the bundle. And they're not maintaining spacing, okay? Then you're like, oh, well, crap. What do I do now? Because that takes you out of the ability to use this allowance here. And that would ultimately send your butt down to using the table 310.15C1. And if we have got, for example, 11 MCs in there with 12 twos in each one, and we got 11, so now that's 22 current carrying conductors. Well, we have over 20, and we're like, crap. So if we didn't have an exception, then we would come down here and look and we'd say, well, damn, if it's 21 to 30, that's going to drop it to 45 as a multiplier. Well, what does the exception say? Well, this exception says, you know what? If your cables meet the requirements of 310.15C1D1, and that is the one about not having a jacket on it, through C1D3, which means it also doesn't have more than 3 current carrying conductors in each cable, and the conductors are 12 gauge, so I had to meet all 3 of these, so the 12 gauge is a trigger here. If that is the case, if you have more than 20 current carrying conductors are installed longer than 24 inches without maintaining spacing, are stacked or are supported on bridle rings, it says a 60% adjustment factor shall be applied. Well, I can tell you right now, you're far better to apply a 60% than to that scenario with the 22 current carrying conductors than it is for you to have to apply a 45. Make a huge difference. So we're assuming that this is MC. We'll assume that the conductors inside of it are rated 90 degrees, THHN. We just go with that assumption. The code allows me to adjust from the higher ampacity conductor. So I would adjust it from the 90 degree, 12 gauge, good for 30 amps. If I do it at 45 multiplier based on the table, then it gives me like a conductor that's good for 13.5 amps. That sucks. But if I use the 60%, I believe it gives me a conductor. If you multiply from the 30, I believe it gives me an ampacity of 18 amps, which means that, hey, for lighting applications, it may be okay for me to be able to utilize it, right? And still be able to keep going and doing what I'm doing. And now I have a conductor that, again, as long as the load doesn't exceed 18 amps, can I terminate that on a 20 amp overcurrent device? Absolutely. So I still get a 20 amp circuit based on the rating of the overcurrent device. So I still meet that, especially if it's a circuit to a load that demands that it be a 20 amp rated circuit. So it's still at 20 amps. Now my load can't exceed 18 amps, right? But at the end of the day, when you're looking at it, you're like, at least I have something to work with. And it still can be protected at 20 amp overcurrent protected device, and we're okay. Okay. And we meet the rules also in 210.20 for the overcurrent protection for continuous loads. Okay, that type of scenario. So it's one of those things that you're still going to be okay, but the moment you have to use that 45, you're screwed. Now, why do I bring that up? Again, let's go to my example of mixing 12s and 10s, right? So if I had 10 MC cables with 12 conductor in it, okay, then that's 20 current conductors of 12. And then I have 4 MCs in the bundle that have 10 gauge, again, 2 current conductors in each cable, and that ends up with 8. So I have a total of 28 current conductors. Well, because the bundle includes 10s, they do not meet the criteria of 31015C1D. Okay, because this whole criteria was based on 12 gauges, and you treat the bundle as a bundle because those 10s are going to be putting off heat that's going to be affected by what? They're going to be affecting the ampacity of those 12 gauge conductors. Now, the exception was for you to have over 20, but then as you read it, it required the conductors to still be 12. So that means you can't even use the exception because it demands the use of the exception that it has to meet the rules in 1, 2, and 3. That means the conductors all in this bundle have to be 12 gauge. So the fact that you got 10 gauge cables in there removes your ability to use anything in this allowance of 31015C1D. So what do you end up having to do? Well, you're screwed. You have to treat them as 28 current carrying conductors, and you're going to have to apply the multiplier 45 from the table 31015C1, and you're going to apply it to the ampacities of the 12s, and you're going to apply it to the ampacities of the 10s. And that's just your new ampacity. And again, it may drop you, probably will drop you below any usable value, especially with the 12 gauge. So it's so important to understand how these rules are applied. And again, the bundling part of it can be something that we can argue until the sun goes down and the sun comes up, and your AHJ is going to make the call. But in the general charging rule, it's very clear that if they are bundled together, doesn't say bundling, but they are installed together without maintaining spacing, which is slang for bundling, continuously length longer than 24 inches, then you're going to have to apply the adjustment factors. The allowance under D is simply saying, you know what? I get they're bundled, whether they're bundled 1 inch in this case or over 24, I get it. They're bundled. So you're coming to me to find some relief. Okay, well, I'm going to give you some relief as long as there's no jacket on it, there's not more than 3 current conductors, and the conductors are 12 gauge, and you have not more than 20, boom, I'm going to give you some relief. You get me? And then next thing they're going to go is, well, you know what? If you happen to have over 20, and you have over 20, and you still meet the requirements of 1, 2, and 3, then I'm going to let you get away with it. But here's the caveat. Okay? Here's the caveat. I'm going to let you do what? I'm going to let you use 60% rather than the 45%. And that's going to save your butt in some cases. But in order to use this exception, it has to be 12. Now, there are some people out there that will say, I'm sure there are, that will say, no, you know what? If I don't have more than 20 of the 12s, and then I have the 10s, then I can treat each separately. So I can apply this allowance to the 12s because it's not more than 20, but then I apply the general rule to the 10s, okay, using the summation of all the conductors. So it'd be 28 current carrying conductors, and apply the 45% to the 10s, but I'm okay to ignore those that are bundled that are not more than 20. But that's not really what the code says here, right? That bundle is treated as one because it puts off mutual heating because you're bundling. And that's going to affect the ampacities of those 12s. So at the end of the day, you know, whether they were 10s or more 12s, doesn't matter. There's still more than 20 current carrying conductors in that bundle, right? And if that is the case, overall bundle, then that's the case. If you want to apply the exception, then it makes it very clear that its exception only will apply if they're 12 gauge. And that is why the exception references 1, 2, and 3. So whatever you want to make up in your mind and think that number 4 allows you to isolate out the 12s from the 10s in a multiple bundle where you have different sizes, then it kind of doesn't make sense when exception 4 ends up referencing that, okay, well, to do this, to give you the 60%, you need to make sure they're still all 12s. You get what I'm saying? Okay. All right. And in order to apply 4, not more than 20, then that has to be 12s. Okay. So anyway, you interpret it how you want. That's how I look at it. And that's the only way to ensure that you're not going to break down that insulation. I encourage you to go over and read my blog, because I also bring up an example of non-simultaneously energized conductors that don't have to be counted as current carrying conductors. And I give an example of that where I might have a raceway running to a piece of equipment that is basically has the air conditioning loads and the furnace loads, but neither one of them will be on at the same time. So there might be 6 conductors in that raceway, let's say, but only 3 of them at any given time will be energized. So I only have to count 3 rather than the total of 6 as current carrying conductors, because these 3 for the furnace cannot be energized at the same time, let's say, as the other ones for the AC system. You get what I'm saying? So that is actually underneath the table in 310.15c1. It is an asterisk. It reminds you when it comes to the number of conductors, and it's the very last sentence. And so that may save some people if they're running conductors in a raceway to a piece of equipment that cannot be, they might be running to 2 pieces of equipment that cannot be energized at the same time. That may save somebody's butt, okay? And also that note down there, or that asterisk underneath it, also reminds you, obviously, that you're not going to be using the grounding or bonding conductors as current carrying conductors. People will argue but they carry fault current. Yes, but they're not classified as current carrying conductors. Okay, so they don't have to be counted as such. And where do you see that? 310.15f. Okay, go read it. Read it and weep, and in that type of thing. So, all right. All right, folks, that's about all I probably wanted to talk about on today's episode. Hopefully you got something out of it. I encourage you to go read the blog. It's free. Get our mobile app. If you really want to learn the NEC good, or you have opinions on this article, go over to the blog and at the bottom, sign in and leave your comment. Don't be shy. I'm not going to rip you. I'm not going to delete you or block you. Unless you're nasty, then I'll block you. But if you just have a legitimate comment, man, get involved, guys. This is what it's all about. To be involved and to learn the NEC together. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you think I'm interpreting something different. That's perfectly okay. I'm here to learn too. So, okay, I'm not a know-it-all. I'm just trying to give you some experience from 39 years of working in the code where I develop my opinions from. And so, good. I love a good debate. So let's do it. All right? All right, folks. Till next time, stay safe. God bless. And I appreciate you all taking your time to listen today. Catch us. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast. We'll catch you on upcoming episode. Take care.
Thanks for tuning into another electrifying episode of the Master of the NEC podcast. We hope you're feeling more powered up and ready to tackle the electrical world with the knowledge and confidence you need to succeed. Remember, in the electrical trade, knowledge is power, and we're here to make sure you stay plugged into the latest insights, tips, and code updates. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share the podcast with your fellow electricians and industry pros. Until next time, keep your tools sharp, your circuits clear, and your mind focused, because here at the Master the NEC podcast, we're all about sparking your success. Stay safe, stay smart, and keep mastering the trade. From all of us here at Electrical Code Academy, thank you for all your support, and we will see you on the next amazing Master the NEC podcast episode.